Yo, what's up? Welcome back to another episode of the SWUS College Football Week 9. Saturdays here, coming into this one with some momentum. Had two winning college football weeks in a row. Coming in already up money from the midweek games, coming in with some momentum. I've said that before and got smacked in the face when I said it. So hopefully that's not how this Saturday goes. In this video, I'm going to go through as many games as I can. Probably not going to get through all of them. If you want to skip all this and just want to see the bets that I personally place, just head over to KyleKirms.com and click on Open Bets. You can see it there. Live show, 10 a.m. Eastern time. We'll go through every single game on the board. We're going through 27 of them. Not every single game, 27 lined up. If you're able to make it, we'd love to see you in the comments. College Football Saturday, Week 9. Let's do it.
Welcome to the SWUS. The SWUS. Hey, get the SWUS.
First up, we got Washington on the road at 9-win Indiana. Indiana looking strong so far this year, laying 6.5 points at home, total sitting at 53.5 pretty much across the board. Let's take a look at the pie charts. According to this data, action's coming in heavy on the 9-win Indiana side. Over 85% of the tickets, over 95% of the money coming in on Indiana. Considering they've blown out every single team they've seen so far this year, I'd say that makes a little bit of sense. So I'm actually not going to spend a ton of time on this game because we don't know what this Indiana offense looks like without Curtis Rourke. Curtis Rourke getting surgery on his thumb, I think it is. I think it's thumb surgery. He's going to be out at least a couple weeks. So I don't know if we can lay 6.5 points with this team without the quarterback. I mean, he's been excellent. The passing offense has probably been the most impressive aspect of this football team so far. Not to mention they're matched up against a Washington defense that's a lot better than we expected this year. Washington's 9th in the country in yards per play allowed, looking like a top 10 pass defense. Yes, they haven't seen a ton of elite passing attacks. In fact, they've seen basically zero, but they have seen a lot of good rushing attacks. And this, I'm not saying this Washington defense is elite by any stretch, but it's definitely playing pretty well right now. In Indiana, without their quarterback, I'm not trying to lay 6.5, 7 points with the backup quarterback. You could see how important the passing attack has been to Indiana so far this year. They're averaging over 322 passing yards per game, over 62% success rate per dropback, 10.34 yards per pass attempt. So what can we really expect from this team without their starting quarterback? It's tough to say. And let's not forget, when it comes to Indiana's defense, they are relatively unproven to a degree. They haven't seen a ton of elite offenses. In fact, you could probably make the argument that Will Rogers and this Washington offense will be their toughest test of the year. So I'm not trying to lay 6.5, 7 points with a backup quarterback against a Washington team that I think is pretty good. A Washington team coming off a bye. So it's going to be Washington or pass for me here. Not really trying to step in front of Indiana either. I took the under in that Indiana-Nebraska game, and Nebraska put up like 7 points. Indiana put up 90. So Indiana alone cooked my under. So I'm not really trying to step in front of them. It'll be Washington plus the points or pass for this one. Next, sticking in the Big Ten for the next one, we got Nebraska on the road in Columbus. Ohio State laying 25.5 points at home. Total sitting at 48.5. Let's take a look at the pie charts, and according to this data, action's coming in pretty split on this one. Tickets coming in about 50-50. Money slightly leaning towards Ohio State, but take this data with a grain of salt. So let's get into this matchup, and we'll start with Nebraska's sorry excuse for an offense. I'm joking, but Nebraska's offense has looked really bad. 95th in the country in yards per play. After getting off to a kind of a promising start, they've really fallen off. The run game, so disappointing. Just 105th in yards per carry, 96th in effective rush. Raiola has shown us he can make some plays through the air, though. Let's give him a little bit of credit. And more importantly, in this matchup, he's up against Ohio State's pass rush, right? One of the best pass rushers in the country. 15th in pressure rate, 5th in sack rate, 3rd in pass rush grade. Raiola has shown us he's able to make plays under pressure, which is huge for a freshman quarterback. His numbers don't crumble when pressured. I mean, he gets the ball out. He doesn't take sacks. He doesn't turn the ball over. So that's something. Going on the road in Columbus, you at least want to see that. The problem is this Nebraska offense has looked so dysfunctional in the last two games. I mean, in their last two games against Rutgers and Indiana, under 200 passing yards per game, just 5.5 yards per pass, and then 31.1% success rate per dropback. So maybe you can look at this as a buy low spot on Nebraska's offense. It's a tough sell, I know, but we are getting 25.5 points here. We're talking about a big number. But you know what? When it comes to this Nebraska team, the offenses look so bad that it's kind of overshadowing that the defenses look pretty good. This is still a top 25 defense according to FEI ratings. They're 19th. I mean, they're 21st in the country in yards per play allowed, 14th in yards per carry, 19th in effective rush, 24th in effective pass. So as bad as the Nebraska offense has looked, the defense has done its job. Now they're going to have their hands full. They're on the road in Columbus. Ohio State might be the most powerful offense in the FBS. But I think it's important to point out that Nebraska defensively had one bad game on the road in Indiana. They smoked them. 56 points scored in the game, over 61% success rate, 7.86 yards per play. Kind of makes it easy to forget that Nebraska's defense looked really good up to that point in the season. I mean, remember what they did to Shedeur Sanders in Colorado? In week 2, just 10 points allowed to that offense, 4.19 yards per play. They shut that offense down. Nebraska has a top 25 pass rush. They've proven that several times this year. 14th in pressure rate, 28th in sack rate, 16th in pass rush grade. How do you beat Will Howard? You put pressure on him. That's been the story with Will Howard dating back to his days at Kansas State. His splits when pressured are pretty ugly looking. So Nebraska has a pass rush. I mean, same as Shedeur Sanders. They put pressure on him. They threw him off. There's a path. That being said, Colorado can't run the ball. Ohio State most definitely can. In fact, they might have the best RB duo in the country. That's the glaring difference here. And Nebraska couldn't stop the run for shit last week at Indiana. 6.52 yards per carry, 55% success rate per rush. I mean, their run defense looked really good up to that point. Just 2.81 yards per carry allowed on the season up to the Indiana game. So I do think the Nebraska run defense is solid. Look, obviously the numbers are going to show that Ohio State is significantly better than Nebraska. We're talking about a 25.5 point line here. But let's not forget, they're going to Happy Valley next week, the Buckeyes. Saturday, November 2nd, week 10 at Penn State. One of the biggest games of the year. Might be a little bit of a look-ahead spot here. So 25.5, Raiola has shown us he can make plays under pressure. I think they can keep it close. Give me Nebraska plus the 25.5. Let's do it, Dylan. Next, let's head over to the SEC. Next, we got Oklahoma on the road at Ole Miss. Rebels laying 20 or 20.5 points at home, depending on your sports book. Total sitting at 48.5 or 49. Let's take a look at the pie charts, and according to the data, action seems to be coming in on the Oklahoma side. Just over 55% of the tickets, over 65% of the money coming in on the Sooners. Take it with a grain of salt. Let's take a look at this matchup, and we'll start with the Ole Miss offense against the Oklahoma defense. This looks like a pretty close matchup on paper. Ole Miss, the problem with their offense is they racked up a ton of numbers early on against some really bad defenses. Don't look quite as good as of late now that they've started playing their SEC games. But they are still 6th in the country in yards per play. They're sitting at 12th in OFEI. Passing attack is 3rd in yards per pass attempt, 10th in success rate per dropback, 10th in effective pass. This is the Oklahoma defense that has proven to us they're probably a top 10 run defense. 7th in yards per carry, 8th in success rate per rush, 21st in effective rush. They have gotten thrown on a little bit here and there, but as a whole, this is a very good defense. But when it comes to the Ole Miss offense, like I said, the problem is what's going on in the last 3 weeks. Yes, they've seen some very good defenses. Well, 2 very good defenses, Kentucky and South Carolina. LSU is definitely not a defense I would classify as very good. But in their last 3 games, now that we've gotten into SEC play, just 23.3 points per game. 37% success rate is terrible. Just 6 yards per play. Certainly not what we were expecting from Ole Miss offensively this year. They're matched up against a very good defense in Oklahoma, so part of you might think, hey, we can't trust this Ole Miss offense right now. It doesn't look how we expected it. And I hear you, but let's not act like this Oklahoma defense has been impenetrable. Sure, it's been very good, but Texas had no problem moving the ball on them. They put up 34 points, 6.66 yards per play, just a 39.3% success rate. So Oklahoma's defense did put up a fight. But still, I mean, the Oklahoma offense is so bad that they just continue to put their defense in bad spots. And let's not forget, this Ole Miss offense has the capabilities of going off at any second. We haven't seen it yet in SEC play, but the amount of talent that offense has, I feel like it's coming at some point. In their first 4 games, they were averaging 55 points per game. Over 61% success rate, 8.85 yards per play is just silly. That's video game numbers. Granted, those games were against some really bad defenses, but this Ole Miss offense, we saw what they could do last year. We haven't seen it yet in SEC play, but it's only a matter of time before this offense comes out looking like the Ole Miss offense we expected, and at home, coming off a ugly loss on the road, a bye week. I think this might be the time for Ole Miss to explode offensively. And on the other side of the ball, it's not even a discussion. I mean, Oklahoma offensively is a train wreck. They're 131st in yards per play, 129th in success rate, 130th in PPA. They can't run the ball. They can't throw the ball. And Ole Miss defensively is living up to every bit of the hype. I mean, the offense has stuttered a little bit recently in the SEC play. The defense hasn't. They're up against an Oklahoma offense that can't seem to do anything. In their last 6 games, they're averaging 17.3 points per game, just 4.1 yards per play, 33.6% success rate, and it doesn't seem to be getting better. Look at their last 2 games. They're averaging 6 points a game. 6. They're averaging under a touchdown a game in their last 2. Yeah, it was against Texas and South Carolina, 2 very good defenses, but so is Ole Miss. Ole Miss defense belongs in the conversation with these 2 teams. Just 3.51 yards per play in their last 2 games. And Ole Miss defense, like I said, the offense has been stuttering now that we got into SEC play, but defense looks great. Just 17.3 points per game, 34.7% success rate, 4.74 yards per play. That's against Kentucky, South Carolina, and LSU. So that's in their SEC play. This defense is very good at home coming off the bye. I mean, I think Ole Miss finally wakes up. This number all the way up at 20.5 makes it a really tough bet to place. I took Oklahoma against Texas at plus 17, but part of the reason for that was the rivalry, right? The Red River rivalry. I thought Oklahoma would come out with some trick plays, keep it close. Those rivalry games are usually crazy. They got their asses beat. So now on the road in Ole Miss against a pissed-off Ole Miss team at home coming off a bye, just sounds like a nightmare. So I would only go Ole Miss here, but I'm not going to lay the big number with an offense that doesn't seem to be functioning properly right now. So Ole Miss minus 20 or pass next game. Notre Dame on the road at Navy. Navy catching 12.5 or 13.5 now. Navy catching 13.5. Numbers moving towards Notre Dame, it looks like. So Navy catching 13.5 points at home. Total sitting at 51.5. Let's take a look at the pie charts. And according to the data, action's coming in pretty split on this one. Tickets just over 55% towards Navy. Money back closer to 50-50, maybe slightly leaning towards Notre Dame. As I always say, take this data with a grain of salt. So let's get into this matchup. And this Navy team, what they've done so far is really impressive. We can't ignore the fact that they've played literally nobody. If you look at their defensive numbers on the year, 66th in yards per play, 76th in yards per carry allowed, 69th in yards per pass attempt allowed. You got to take into consideration the opponents. Notre Dame offensively, yes, they're extremely one-dimensional. This is not a passing attack that fears anybody, but they can run the ball. And they've run the ball on some serious defenses. But first, we need to pull up the Navy opponents. So yes, they're allowing just 19.7 points per game, just 5.48 yards per play. Solid numbers, success rate below 40%. They've played an FCS opponent, Temple, Memphis, who's a mess this year, UAB, Air Force, the worst Air Force team we've seen in 20 years, and Charlotte. Those are Navy's opponents. Are we going to throw them a parade for holding those teams to under 20 points a game? I mean, I'm not trying to take credit away from them. You can't play who's not on your schedule. But as far as lining them up against Notre Dame, it's a tough sell here. Notre Dame in their last 3 games against Power 4 opponents, Louisville, Stanford, Georgia Tech. I know Stanford's defense isn't anything special, but I mean, compared to the teams Navy's playing, it's impressive. They're still averaging 37 points per game, over 45% success rate, 6.12 yards per play. So Notre Dame is looking impressive as hell against legitimate opponents. This is a Navy defensive line that's struggling to stay on the line of scrimmage against UAB. I mean, 122nd in line yards, 107th in stuff rate. Notre Dame, yes, there's some injuries to their offensive line, but this is still there's such a talent discrepancy here between these 2 units. Notre Dame's offensive line, even the backup, should blow Navy right off the line of scrimmage. Notre Dame running the ball this year, this is against Power 4 defenses. 5.86 yards per carry, 215.8 rushing yards per game, 43.9% success rate per rush. That's only in their games against Power 4 defenses. Navy hasn't played a single Power 4 opponent yet. And by the way, it's not like Navy's putting up these insane record-breaking numbers. I mean, their defensive numbers are just okay. 66th, 76th, and 69th, like I said, against those teams, against the teams they've played. So, I mean, it's not even that impressive defensively. I don't see anything here that indicates Navy can stop Notre Dame from running the football in this game. Now, on the other side of the ball, it's a little more interesting because Navy's offense, I can't even believe it. They're 2nd in the country in yards per play, 7th in success rate, 6th in PPA, one of the best rushing attacks in college football on paper. 3rd in yards per carry, 9th in success rate per rush, 2nd in effective rush. The passing attack's been good. Even they don't drop back to pass often, but when they do, it's been extremely efficient. 2nd in yards per pass attempt, 12th in success rate per dropback. That being said, the defenses that Navy has seen so far this year, I mean, they don't even come close to Notre Dame. Notre Dame's one of the best defenses in the country. They're 5th in the country in yards per play, 13th in success rate, 3rd in PPA. They're 2nd in overall DFEI. We can pull up Navy's offensive numbers from their last 5 games. 44 points a game, 7.67 yards per play, 51.7% success rate. Looks amazing. Temple, Memphis, UAB, Air Force, Charlotte. I mean, there's just no one here. There's no competition here. Now, I do like how Navy's offense is a lot more versatile than it has been in years past. No question, this is a dangerous Navy offense. Part of sports is taking care of business in the games you're supposed to win. You deserve credit for that. It's not like you dismiss all those games. And what Navy's doing is really impressive. Over 277 rushing yards per game, 6.24 yards per carry. That's not really shocking. Look at the other side. 158.6 passing yards per game, 13.08 yards per attempt, 51.2% success rate per dropback. This is a good Navy offense, but they just haven't seen anything like this. Notre Dame, look at their defense in their road games alone. Now, this isn't a true road game. It's in MetLife. But look at Notre Dame's defense in their road games this year. Against Texas A&M, Purdue, and Georgia Tech. Purdue's a pretty bad football team, but the offense isn't terrible. They've been moving the ball. In just their road games, they're allowing 11 points per game, 3.96 yards per play. Look at their numbers against the run in those road games. Just 2.7 yards per carry against Texas A&M, Purdue, and Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech's the top 25 rushing attack, 38% success rate per rush. I mean, this is just an entirely new level of competition for Navy. And let's not forget, this is a Navy offense that was struggling a little bit last week against Charlotte. I know they put up 51 points. That was because Charlotte turned the ball over 5 times. They only averaged 5.24 yards per play in that game and had not a great looking PPA offensively. So look, I think Notre Dame should kill them, but we are talking about laying a big number, and this Navy team is coming into this one with confidence. Definitely going to have the magic effect on their side. They forced 5 turnovers last week. I think Notre Dame wins by at least 2 touchdowns, so it'll be Notre Dame minus the 13 or the 13.5. I don't know if I actually bet this one, though. Next game. ACC up next. We got North Carolina on the road in Virginia. Cavs laying 4 or 4.5, depending on your sports book. Total sitting at 50 or 50.5. Let's take a quick look at the pie charts, and according to the data, public action coming in slightly on the North Carolina side, just about 60% of the tickets, about 65% of the money coming in on the Virginia side. As I always say, take this data with a grain of salt. So let's get into this one, and we'll start with some head-to-head history here. Virginia has gotten the better of the Tar Heels. They're 5-2 in their last 7 matchups against North Carolina, 6-1 against the number. So Virginia has not been an easy out for North Carolina, and North Carolina's been favored in 5 games in a row. So a little bit of a change of pace here. UVA laying points to North Carolina for the first time since 2018. So a little bit of a change of pace. But what do we think of this matchup? Let's look at the North Carolina offense. Obviously, a unit that depends on running the ball. They need to get the ball to Hampton. Quarterback situation there has not been pretty. Max Johnson goes down with an injury in the first game of the season. I mean, the offense still hasn't been terrible. They're still 54th in yards per play, 73rd in success rate, mostly powered by the run game, 47th in yards per carry, 29th in success rate per rush. Wow. 31st in effective rush. Offense as a whole sitting 44th in OFEI. On paper, this could be a tough matchup. Virginia has been tough against the run this year. They're 41st in yards per carry allowed. 91st in success rate per rush isn't great. 47th in effective rush. I mentioned how North Carolina's been having problems at the quarterback position. You might look at Criswell's numbers on the year and be like, Kyle, it doesn't look that bad. I mean, 1,369 yards, 7.3 yards per attempt, 8 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. A lot of his production came in one game. It was the James Madison game, his first start. They had 475 yards, 9.9 yards per attempt, over 52% success rate per dropback. In his 3 starts since then, 6.27 yards per attempt, success rate per dropback under 37%, just 245.3 passing yards per game. So look, he hasn't been practical joke terrible, but no question, this North Carolina offense has been pretty one-dimensional. They're pretty reliant on the run. Now, we can point at Virginia's defense and say they've been struggling against the pass, and we wouldn't be wrong by saying that. In their last 4 games, they're allowing 8.63 yards per pass attempt. 40% success rate per dropback actually isn't bad. 283 passing yards per game. But if you look at their opponents, I mean, Louisville, Tyler Shuck, Clemson, Cade Klubnik. Coastal Carolina has Vasco. He can throw the ball a little bit. Boston College has Castellanos. So, I mean, they've seen some quarterbacks that can throw the ball. I don't know if I'd necessarily throw Criswell in the same discussion as those 4 guys. So I don't know if UNC is able to keep that going. Virginia's struggling against the pass. I don't know if Criswell could come in here, throw the ball on Virginia's defense. I will say, though, North Carolina looked good running the ball last game against Georgia Tech. And I know not everyone thinks Georgia Tech's defense is great. They are greatly improved against the run this year. That's not a bad run defense. North Carolina, 5.91 yards per carry in the game, over 51% success rate per rush. That's very impressive. And I mentioned before how Virginia's defense has been tough against the run this year, but in their last 2 games, 5.47 yards per carry allowed, 51.9% success rate per rush, 186 rushing yards allowed per game. Yes, it was against Louisville and Clemson, but Louisville hasn't been that strong running the ball this year. North Carolina has an NFL caliber running back. I think they can run the ball on Virginia in this one. Now, what about on the other side, though? At a quick glance, it looks like Virginia should be able to move the ball on North Carolina. 58th in yards per play, 81st in success rate. Pretty balanced. We know this Virginia offense relies on throwing the ball with Calandria. They're 63rd in yards per pass attempt, 81st in success rate per dropback, 57th in effective pass. North Carolina's pass defense, they're 40th in success rate per dropback, but they've been giving up some big plays through the air. Just 112th in yards per pass attempt allowed, 103rd in effective pass. Now, the good news for North Carolina is despite Calandria having a good season, and he is, 1,650 yards, 7.5 yards per attempt, 11 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. He's been protecting the football. But despite, the reason I said good news for North Carolina, despite Calandria having a good season, not a ton of explosive plays, just a D plus in big time throw rate. And that's really what North Carolina's been getting cooked on, the big plays. They're not consistently getting thrown on 6 yards here, 6 yards there. It hasn't really been like that. They're getting hit with big plays. Calandria, not a ton of explosive passing plays this year. And something else we need to mention about Virginia's offense, last week against Clemson, you might look at the box score and be like, oh, Calandria was throwing the ball in Clemson last week. 278 yards, 8.4 yards per attempt, over 47% success rate per dropback. Yeah, these numbers look great. Clemson was up 38-10 entering the fourth quarter. Virginia scored 3 touchdowns in the fourth quarter in garbage time. They went up and down the field 3 times in garbage time, obviously padding a lot of these stats. It was 38-10. They had 10 points going into the fourth quarter, so I wouldn't read too much into these numbers. That was a beatdown start to finish. Virginia scored a couple touchdowns and backdoor covered, but Clemson beat the hell out of them. And North Carolina's been playing some solid defense against the pass. In their last 3 games, 241.3 passing yards allowed per game, just 7 yards per attempt, 39% success rate per dropback. And look at the opponents: Duke, Pitt, Georgia Tech. That's Malik Murphy, Eli Holstein, Haynes King. 3 legitimate quarterbacks. So despite what the year-long numbers may say, we're talking about a North Carolina defense that's played 3 consecutive games against legitimate quarterbacks and played great defense against the pass. So I think matching up against Calandria, who hasn't hit on a bunch of big plays through the air, but I think it'll be a good defensive effort for North Carolina against the pass. I'm a little worried about their run defense. Not that Virginia's rushing attack is anything crazy. 4.21 yards per carry on the year, 44.8% success rate per rush. But in their last 4 games, North Carolina's struggling to stop the run. 5.68 yards per carry allowed, 50% success rate per rush. So North Carolina's run defense definitely gives me some concerns, but this is a Virginia offense that wants to throw the ball with Calandria, and I think UNC is equipped to give them problems. So 4.5, give me North Carolina. I don't think I've bet North Carolina once this whole season. Going with them here. UNC plus 4.5. Next game. ACC up next. We got Georgia Tech, Virginia Tech. Vatech laying 10 or 10.5 points at home here. Total sitting at 51.5. Let's take a look at the pie charts. According to the data, action coming in heavily on the Georgia Tech side. Over 65% of the money, over 65% of the tickets, over 75% of the money, my bad. But as always, take this data with a grain of salt. Not going to spend too much time talking about this one. Straight up, if Haynes King is going to play and he's healthy, Georgia Tech should be live in this one. I mean, this line should be about 3, even though Virginia Tech has looked strong. But we don't know if Haynes King is playing. He's listed as questionable. If you match these 2 teams up, they're actually pretty evenly matched. Georgia Tech should be able to run the ball on Virginia Tech, even though that's the strength of their defense. This is a top 25 rushing attack. Again, I'm not going to spend too much time talking about it because we don't know if he's going to play. So if Haynes King plays, I might place a bet on Georgia Tech, but as of right now, it's just a pass. Next, let's move down to the SEC next. We got Arkansas on the road at Mississippi State. Mississippi State catching 6.5 points at home. Total sitting at 58.5. Let's take a look at the pie charts. According to the data, tickets coming in about 50-50. Money coming in heavily on the Arkansas side, over 90% of the money on Arkansas, according to this data, which you should take with a grain of salt. So let's get into this matchup, and we'll start with the Arkansas offense against the Mississippi State defense. And I mean, at first glance, this looks like a major mismatch, right? I mean, Arkansas 63rd in yards per play, 22nd in success rate. They've been running the ball pretty well. They've been throwing the ball pretty efficiently. Taylon Green is coming along. That being said, Mississippi State's defense has been through the gauntlet. They've seen a lot of really good offenses. I'm not trying to say Mississippi State's defense is good by any stretch. Clearly, you look at the numbers, this is not a good defense. 125th in yards per play allowed, 132nd in success rate. They're 133rd in success rate per dropback. Yeah, it's not a good defense, but we'll get to their opponents in a second, and you could see, like, all right, they played the best offenses in the SEC. But yeah, let's pull up Taylon Green's numbers on the year. Don't really do it justice because he seems to be getting better as the season progresses. 1,741 yards, 7.8 yards per attempt, 6 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. But if you look at the last 2 games, 268 passing yards per game, 8.8 yards per attempt, 52.3% success rate per dropback. So he has been pretty efficient throwing the ball in the last 2 games. I will say LSU, not the strongest defense, and Tennessee's pass defense has not really looked strong in the last few games. They actually stepped up in the Alabama game, but the couple before that, they hadn't looked very good. So maybe a couple of questionable defenses in terms of SEC standards. Meanwhile, the Mississippi State pass defense, Texas, Georgia, Texas A&M, and Wegman played in that game, Florida. They're seeing the best passing attacks in the SEC. I know Toledo's in there as well. Yeah, they're allowing over 271 passing yards per game, 56% success rate per dropback, 8.73 yards per attempt. Again, not trying to say this is a good defense. I'm just saying there's a lot of defenses that would have some ugly-looking numbers against the pass if they went through that gauntlet of a schedule. What really worries me about this game is the Arkansas rushing attack. What happened to it? In the first 3 games, they were averaging almost 6.6 yards per carry, 58.9% success rate per rush, 259 rushing yards per game. In their last 4, yes, they've played some tough defenses, just 3.07 yards per carry, 113.8 rushing yards per game. Now, playing Mississippi State's run defense should be the remedy that they need. Mississippi State has been getting run on, but again, Florida, Texas, Georgia, Texas A&M, it's a gauntlet of a schedule. They're allowing 5.51 yards per carry, 51.9% success rate per rush in those games, 177.8 rushing yards allowed per game. So as a whole on that side of the ball, look, it's tough to have any sort of faith in Mississippi State defensively. I will say there's going to be a point where we can sell high on the Arkansas offense. I mean, they're going to start seeing some tough defenses. We know Taylon Green is not that good. We watched him last year with Boise State. So I do think there's going to be a sell high spot for the Arkansas offense at some point. I just don't know if Mississippi State is necessarily the opportunity for that. So, yeah, that's how I feel on that side of the ball. On the other side of the ball, we got the Mississippi State offense, not nearly as bad as the defense. And the Arkansas defense, I'm a lot more willing to buy than the Arkansas offense. Stopping LSU, stopping Tennessee. I mean, they've had some good defensive performances. They're 59th in the country in yards per play, 53rd in success rate. They've been great against the run. 41st in yards per carry, 22nd in success rate per rush, 22nd in effective rush. Numbers against the pass, not quite as impressive, but they have seen some tough passing attacks. 51st in yards per pass attempt, 96th in success rate per dropback, 18th in effective pass. Now, will Michael Van Buren be able to exploit the Arkansas pass defense? I mean, not that he's been terrible. He's protecting the football. He's not turning it over, but just 6.9 yards per attempt, 6 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, 792 passing yards in the games he started, 230.7 passing yards per game, just 34.9% success rate per dropback, 6.83 yards per pass attempt. That being said, look at the opponents. Could you imagine your first 3 career starts as a freshman are against Texas, Georgia, and Texas A&M? I mean, that's kind of unfair. I don't think there's any freshman in the history of college football that's going to have successful throwing numbers in their first 3 starts against Texas, Georgia, and Texas A&M. That's kind of ridiculous. Now, Arkansas's defense has done a great job limiting the big plays through the air, just 6.05 yards per pass attempt allowed. 49.3% success rate per dropback, though, so they're allowing a lot of passes underneath. Maybe Van Buren's able to piece him up. He hasn't been turning the ball over, hasn't been making big plays either, but maybe Van Buren's able to finally put himself together some stats against a defense that isn't top 5. The problem is he's going to have no run support here. Mississippi State can't run the ball at all. 3.12 yards per carry as a team this season, 39% success rate per rush, just 115 rushing yards per game. And as I said before, this Arkansas defense has been so good against the run. 3.68 yards per carry as a team this season, 36% success rate per rush. So this Arkansas defensive front has been very good. I don't know. Maybe Van Buren's able to make some plays. I do think Mississippi State defensively could surprise some people and actually make some stops. So I guess I would lean towards the under. The reason I haven't bet it, it's up at 58.5. You might be thinking, Kyle, if you think the defense can make some stops, take the under. Well, the reason it's up at 58.5 is the pace. Both of these teams run insanely fast paces. Arkansas 12th in plays per game this year, Mississippi State 22nd. So these teams run such fast paces that I don't know if I can take the under. That's what I want to do, though. I want to take under 58.5. That's my pick for this game. The quick pace is really scaring me, though. So right now it's under a pass. Next game. Illinois is out west in Eugene. Oregon's laying 21.5 points at home. Total sitting at 54.5 for this one. Let's take a quick look at the pie charts. Action's coming in heavily on the Illinois side. Over 65% of the tickets, over 85% of the money. As I always say, take this data with a grain of salt. So let's get into this matchup, and it really comes down to whether or not you think Altmaier is going to be able to throw the ball on Oregon's defense. If you look at Illinois' passing numbers on the year, they do look solid. 22nd in yards per pass attempt, 25th in success rate per dropback, 43rd in effective pass. Run support hasn't really consistently been there, but it's been here and there. I mean, they were able to run the ball a little bit in the Nebraska game. Offense as a whole sitting at 53rd in OFEI. This is going to be a challenge because they're on the road in Oregon, and this Ducks defense looks pretty serious. 27th in yards per play, 37th in success rate. It hasn't been perfect. Oregon's offense definitely looks a lot better than their defense, but this is still top 10, top 15 defense in the country. This is an elite pass rush. They're 3rd in pressure rate, 17th in pass rush rate, 44th in sack rate. Luke Altmaier has shown us he's getting rattled when pressured. As you can see here, production definitely taking a dip when pressured. But what concerns me the most for Altmaier here is he really didn't show up in the two biggest games against the two elite defenses, the Penn State game and the Michigan game. Just 132.5 passing yards per game in those two, 37.1% success rate per dropback, 5.8 yards per pass attempt. So when Altmaier needed to show up and prove to us he can throw the ball in these elite defenses, it wasn't really there. And now he's on the road in Oregon, a defense you could argue is every bit as good as Penn State, probably better than Michigan's defense. So really don't like that. Over the course of his career, Altmaier has definitely shown us he's better on the road. But in that Penn State game, I was lucky as hell to cash I think I got plus 17.5. They lost 21-7, but they got destroyed in that game. He couldn't do anything. So I don't know how much faith I have in him throwing the ball here. He did rack up some numbers in the other 4 games outside of the Michigan and Penn State game. 8.68 yards per attempt, 51.2% success rate per dropback, 254 yards per game. One of those was on the road in Nebraska against that pass rush. So I'm not saying there's no hope here for Altmaier, but based on what we saw in the Michigan and Penn State games, doesn't give me a ton of faith that he's going to throw the ball on Oregon in this one. Last week against Michigan was especially bad. They won the game, but Illinois was held to 80 yards passing, 35% success rate per dropback, 4.2 yards per attempt. And like I said, I would take the Ducks defense, especially against the pass, before I would take the Michigan defense. So yeah, not a ton of faith in Altmaier here. On the other side, we got the Oregon offense, and I mean, this is arguably the best offense in the country. Ohio State is 1st in OFEI, Oregon 2nd. They're 11th in yards per play, 9th in success rate. Even the run game's coming around. Early in the season, Oregon was struggling to get the run game going. Jordan James is looking like one of the best running backs in college football now. Certainly, we already know with Dylan Gabriel that this is one of the best passing attacks. You don't need me to tell you about Oregon's offense. You know how dangerous it is. And Illinois' strength is their offense. This is not a great defense. It's not a terrible defense, but by no means is this a great defense. Struggling to stop the run. 82nd in yards per carry allowed, 118th in success rate per rush, 90th in effective rush. Dylan Gabriel, as I'm sure you know, we don't even have to read through these. You know how good Dylan Gabriel's been. Over 2,000 yards passing, 9.1 yards per attempt, 15 touchdowns, 4 interceptions in his last 2 games against Ohio State and Purdue. Okay, Purdue's defense is terrible, but 315.5 passing yards per game, 10.8 yards per attempt, 54.8% success rate per dropback. And Illinois' defense against the pass is just trending in the wrong direction. In their first 3 games, they were locking it down. Congrats. Kansas, Eastern Illinois, Central Michigan, under 5 yards per attempt, 39.1% success rate in their last 4 games. And by the way, these aren't even the toughest opponents. Penn State, okay. Michigan can't throw the ball. Nebraska with Raiola. Purdue, 8.2 yards per attempt allowed, over 48% success rate per dropback. So this Illinois defense, now that we're getting into conference play, It's kind of being exposed as not being very good. I won't lay 21.5 to Altmaier because I do like him, but I'm not jumping at the opportunity to fade Oregon and take the points either. So it'll be Illinois plus 21.5 for pass for me. Next, Northwestern on the road at Iowa for this one. Hawkeyes laying 13.5 or 14 depending on your sports book. Total sitting all the way down at 37.5. Take a look at the pie charts, and according to the data, over 60% of the tickets coming in on Northwestern, over 60% of the money coming in on Iowa. As I always say, take this data with a grain of salt. So let's get into this one, and we'll start with the Northwestern offense against the Iowa defense at Kinnick Stadium. This is a rough one. Obviously, none of us expect Northwestern to do much offensively in this game. Iowa, probably a top 10 defense in the country. Northwestern, a very, very bad offense. It looked for a second when they switched over to Jack Lausch at quarterback that Northwestern was beginning to show us something. They were active in that Indiana game. That was a 3-point game with 6 minutes left. Also, obviously, they beat the shit out of Maryland. So they made the quarterback change, and it was looking better for a second. But still, in their last 4 games with Jack Lausch at quarterback, they're still only averaging 17.3 points per game, just over 30% success rate, 4.27 yards per play. So this is not a good offense, although Jack Lausch definitely gives them more than Mike Wright did. But I do have to say, this elite Iowa defense has not really looked like the Iowa defense we're used to in the last few games. In their first 4 games, they're allowing 13.8 points per game, under 5 yards per play, 35.4% success rate. This is what Iowa's defense usually looks like. Look at their last 3 games. Granted, they did play some tough offenses, but still 27.7 points allowed per game, over 50% success rate, almost 6 yards per play. Iowa's defense has not looked good in their last 3 games. Now, you cannot compare Ohio State, Washington, and Michigan State to Northwestern offensively, but still, the backbone of this Iowa program is its defense, and the defense really hasn't looked very strong in their last 3 games. Not to mention, Jack Lausch is the type of quarterback I would want if I'm going to fade Iowa. Not saying I'm going to fade Iowa. I'm just saying if I'm going to fade Iowa, I want a quarterback that can move, that can use his athleticism to make plays, that can be creative, because you're not going to go into Kinnick and hand the ball off between the tackles and compete with Iowa. That's what they excel at. I mean, you're just not going to do that. Jack Lausch has shown us he can get outside the pocket and make some play. Look, I know it sounds like I'm making a pitch for the Northwestern offense right now. I'm not. This is going to be a nightmare. I'm just saying, like, if I'm going to fade Iowa, Jack Lausch isn't the worst quarterback ever to do it. That's all I said. This Northwestern offense isn't reliant on the run. They are throwing the ball. They're 53rd in pass frequency. So it's not absolutely terrible. Iowa's defense hasn't looked quite that good. But when we flip it over to the other side, this is where we can find some value on Northwestern. And hear me out. This Iowa offense, as I'm sure you know, extremely one-dimensional. They have to run the ball to Caleb Johnson. That's what their identity is. They're pretty good at it. 9th in yards per carry, 58th in success rate per rush, 10th in effective rush. Probably a top 10 rushing attack. They're matched up against a Northwestern defense that specializes in stopping the run. 23rd in yards per carry allowed, 50th in success rate per rush, 15th in effective rush. This is a very, very good run defense. Where Northwestern has struggled defensively is stopping the pass. Iowa doesn't do that. Cade McNamara hasn't had much success at all throwing the ball this year. Northwestern in their last 4 games is allowing just 3.67 yards per carry. 44% success rate per rush isn't great, but under 138 rushing yards per game. That's against Washington, Indiana, Maryland, Wisconsin. It's not like they're playing bad teams. Northwestern's run defense has been good, and the Iowa rushing attack, they started off the season looking like they were just going to steamroll everyone on the ground. Almost 6 yards per carry, over 48% success rate, over 250 rushing yards per game. In their last 3 games, granted, they've played some good teams, 5.39 yards per carry is still good, but 40% success rate per rush, basically 100 less rushing yards per game, from 250 a game to 156.3 a game. Ohio State, okay, but Washington and Michigan State, I would take Northwestern's run defense over both of those teams. So is that enough to take 14 points with Northwestern? In my opinion, it is. The reason I haven't betted is, number one, I've taken 2 big losses betting Northwestern already this year, and I'm trying not to make a habit of losing with the same team over and over again. So I kind of have a sour taste in my mouth when it comes to Northwestern. That's number one. Number two, I don't like how Iowa's coming off a bad loss. Back at home, this is like a good bounce back spot. I don't like that. We should see their best effort. I mean, it's college football. You should see everyone's best effort pretty much every week, but I don't like how they're coming off a bad loss. But overall, I do think 14 is too many here. This Northwestern team is also coming off a real bad loss where the final score is not indicative of how that game went. Northwestern, I believe, had a punt block, a field goal blocked, and they fumbled on their own 3. in that game and still only lost by 20. So if you take a quick look at the final score of that game, you're like, Northwestern got their ass beat. It wasn't really like that. There was 3 huge mistakes. They basically gifted them 17 points. Without that, it was a close defensive game, which is what I think we'll see here. I think Northwestern is able to play them tough. I do think Lausch is able to make some plays against an Iowa defense that doesn't look all that great in the last few weeks. I haven't bet it yet. I'll let you know if I do. We'll talk about it on the live show at 10 a.m. But yeah, Northwestern plus 14. Next game. Next up, we got Maryland on the road at Minnesota. Gophers are laying 4.5. I do see a couple 4s out there. Points at home. Total sitting at 46.5. Let's take a look at the pie charts, and according to the data, action's coming in pretty heavily on the Minnesota side. Over 65% of the tickets, over 90% of the money coming in on the Gophers. Take it with a grain of salt. So let's get into this matchup, and we'll start with the Maryland offense. A surprising pass-heavy offense this year with Billy Edwards Jr. There's been times where it looks pretty good. There's also been times where it's been a disaster. But as a whole, the numbers look all right. 68th in yards per pass attempt, 42nd in success rate per dropback, 20th in effective pass. He really has not had much run support at all. Just 101st in yards per carry, 82nd in success rate, 108th in effective rush. Still, the Maryland offense as a whole is sitting 47th in OFEI. They're going to have their hands full in this one. On the road against a Minnesota defense that always plays well at home. They're 12th in the country in yards per play, 48th in success rate. Elite looking numbers against the pass, 6th in the country in yards per pass attempt allowed, 52nd in success rate per dropback, 11th in effective pass. Like I said, Billy Edwards Jr. on the season looking all right. Over 2,100 yards, 7.5 yards per attempt, 13 touchdowns, 4 picks. He does struggle to get the ball down the field when pressured, which is a little bit of a concern, but he's not turning it over. So, I mean, we're talking about a freshman quarterback here. You'll take that. And Minnesota doesn't have the craziest pass rush. They're 40th in pressure rate, 89th in sack rate, 73rd in pass rush grade. This is not a pass rush that strikes fear into you. So really not worried about that. What I am worried about when it comes to Billy Edwards Jr., he did most of his damage early in the season against 2 terrible defenses. He went absolutely nuclear against UConn and Villanova. 360 yards per game, 10.1 yards per attempt, over a 55% success rate per dropback. He was going off. In his other 5 games, the numbers don't look nearly as good. Just 6.7 yards per pass attempt, 41.5% success rate per dropback. He has seen some good defenses, but I mean, he plays in the Big Ten. It's not like that's going to stop. He's on the road in Minnesota here. And I know you can point at the last game and be like, Kyle, UCLA was throwing the ball in Minnesota, and you're not wrong. They were throwing the ball in Minnesota. 8.1 yards per pass attempt, 52.6% success rate per dropback, 293 yards passing in the game. They were all the way across the country on the West Coast. Also, it was the week before the bye. If you look at their numbers against the pass in their first 6 games before that one, I mean, just 114 passing yards allowed per game. We're talking about elite numbers here. 4.52 yards per pass attempt allowed. That includes the USC game. So this has been a great pass defense. They had one bad game on the road on the West Coast. They're coming off a bye. I expect them to look closer to these numbers than the UCLA game. And if you're expecting Billy Edwards Jr. to have run support in this game on the road in Minnesota, best of luck to you, because Maryland's averaging just 3.43 yards per carry on the season, 40.7% success rate per rush. Like I mentioned before, this has been a bad rushing attack all year. So Billy Edwards on the road is going to be forced to take on this Minnesota defense by himself. I don't like the matchup at all. This is also a Minnesota defense that forces a lot of turnovers. Yeah, it's a tough matchup for Billy Edwards. On the other side, we got the Minnesota offense that's been, I mean, it really looks all right. I wasn't expecting it to be any good this year with Max Brosmer, but I mean, he has proven me wrong. From the second half of that mission, you know, we'll get to Brosmer in a second. Minnesota's offensive numbers, they're 51st in OFEI, 94th in yards per carry, 98th in yards per pass attempt. Success rate numbers look good, meaning Minnesota's getting their 4 and 5 yard plays. Not really. I mean, they're lacking a little bit in the explosive play department. Not a lot of big plays here for the Minnesota offense, but they're getting their chunk yardage. They're matched up against a Maryland defense that has a really good defensive front. They're very strong against the run. 27th in yards per carry, 16th in effective rush. Minnesota's been struggling to run the ball this year. Run game might not be there for the Gophers in this one. That being said, like I was just talking about, this Minnesota offense surprisingly throwing the ball a lot, and surprisingly they're not bad at it with Brosmer. They're 34th in pass frequency so far this year. Brosmer having a much better season than I thought he was going to have. Over 1,400 yards, 6.7 yards per attempt, 8 touchdowns, 4 interceptions, A+ turnover-worthy play rate. Here are Minnesota's passing numbers in their Big Ten games so far this year. 212 yards per game, 41.1% success rate per dropback, 7 yards per attempt. You might be looking at this saying, I mean, Kyle, those are all right. They're not good. Well, look at their competition. This is Minnesota playing in the Big Ten with an FCS transfer at quarterback. I thought they were going to be terrible. I watched this kid Brosmer, and pretty much since the second half of that Michigan game, this kid's playing with so much more confidence. I watched this kid Brosmer drive down the field in the fourth quarter twice. And the reason I can't seem to forget this is I had Michigan -9, and this kid hit me with the backdoor cover. He went up and down the field in the big house, throwing the ball. And since then, since the Michigan game, he's played USC. He played great in the USC game. UCLA game on the road wasn't his best game ever, but they did win out on the West Coast. Basically, since the second half of that Michigan game, which was 3 games ago, this kid's playing with a lot more confidence. And I mentioned before that this Maryland defense has been strong against the run, not so much against the pass. I mean, they were okay against USC, just 6.7 yards per pass attempt allowed. 47.1% success rate per dropback is not good. 336 passing yards allowed in the game. Look at the 2 before that against Northwestern and Indiana. Indiana, okay. 11.1 yards per pass attempt, 41.3% success rate per dropback. Northwestern, Jack Lausch was piecing Maryland up. So you may look at Minnesota's numbers on the year. You might look at Max Brosmer and be like, this kid can't throw the ball on Big Ten defenses. He can't throw the ball on Maryland. I think he can throw the ball in Maryland. This secondary hasn't been very good this year. Now, the run support, probably not. I mean, if they have a 47.6% success rate per rush, which is solid, they're getting their 4-yard carries, they're getting their 5-yard carries, just no explosive runs at all, just 3.47 yards per carry. And Maryland, like I said, they've been very good against the run, just 3 yards per carry allowed on the season. So maybe Brosmer won't have a ton of run support here, but I think he can make throws on this Maryland secondary, and I see a 4 available. I'm going to be on the Gophers in this one. I haven't bet it yet, but I'm going to. I'll be on Minnesota. I'm going to lay the 4. I think this number should be closer to 6. I think Billy Edwards Jr. is going to feed us a couple of interceptions in this one. Give me the Gophers. Minnesota -4 next game. Big 12 up next. We got Oklahoma State on the road at Baylor. Baylor laying 6.5 on most books. There are a couple 7s out there if you look. Total sitting all the way up at 64.5 or 65. Let's take a look at the pie charts here. And according to this data, 65% of the tickets coming in on Oklahoma State, about 58% of the money coming in on Baylor. But as I always say, take this data with a grain of salt. So let's get into this matchup, and we'll start with Oklahoma State's offense. We saw a resurgence last week against BYU, which was awesome. I was on Oklahoma State in that game. They should have won. They lost with like 11 seconds left. It was a great game to watch. They're sitting at 39th in OFEI. It's not that the offense has been terrible this year, but that was the best game we've seen them play on the road at BYU. The passing attack, 66 in yards per pass attempt, 61st in success rate per dropback, 13th in effective pass. Obviously, the lead story with this Oklahoma State offense all year has been the lack of production from Ollie Gordon. They're matched up against a Baylor defense that has some really nice-looking raw data. If you take a closer look, you'll find that this defense isn't really that good. They're 49th in yards per play allowed, 9th in success rate, 54th in PPA. If you look at the schedule-adjusted numbers, 78th in effective rush, 96th in effective pass, 74th in DFEI. And if you're wondering why that is, they racked up some serious elite defensive stats in the first 3 games of the year. Against Utah, Cam Rising got hurt in that game early in the first quarter. An FCS program and Air Force, who might be the worst offense in all of college football, allowing just 9.7 points per game. 24.1% success rate is elite. 3.84 yards per play allowed. So they racked up these elite defensive numbers in these first 3 games here. In the 5 games since then, this defense hasn't looked nearly as good. In fact, they're allowing 37.5 points per game. 40.6% success rate, 5.95 yards per play. So although if you look at the raw data, it looks like this Baylor defense is pretty solid, we know that it's not. I mean, it's not a terrible defense, but it's certainly not a great defense. And this Oklahoma State offense, like I said, through the first 6 games, they were averaging 30.2 points per game. 38.5% success rate isn't great. 5.83 yards per play. Last week on the road at BYU against a great BYU defense, 35 points, 54.5% success rate, 6.38 yards per play, and it looks strikingly similar to last year. I was talking about this. This is why I bet Oklahoma State. Last year, Oklahoma State drops 2 games in a row to move to 2-2. They lost to South Alabama at home. Everyone's like, this Oklahoma State team sucks. They had a primetime game against Kansas State. They were catching 10.5. They named Bowman the starter. Ollie Gordon takes off. And up until that point in the season, he hadn't done much. From that point on, he went nuts. We saw Ollie Gordon make some plays. 16 carries, 107 yards, 2 touchdowns on the ground. I'm not saying Oklahoma State is going to be some elite offense down the stretch, but I do trust Mike Gundy. And when we saw this last year, that Kansas State game, from that point on, they were lighting the scoreboard up. They went on to play in the Big 12 championship. Everyone was saying their season was over, so I wouldn't be surprised if Oklahoma State is a pretty good offense down the stretch. I also wouldn't be surprised if Ollie Gordon is able to start running the ball. But what about on the other side of the ball? Because as good as Oklahoma State looked offensively in that BYU game, the defense is still a problem. They're 120th in the country in yards per play, 84th in success rate, struggling to stop the run, 51st in success rate per dropback, I guess is decent against the pass, but as a whole, this defense is a problem. That being said, I'm not a big fan of this Baylor offense. I don't think Sawyer Robertson is very good. They're 53rd in yards per play, 83rd in success rate, 84th in PPA. Last week's game against Texas Tech is really skewing Baylor's offensive numbers a bit. They put up 59 points, 49.2% success rate, over 8.1 yards per play. In the 3 games before that, this offense didn't look that great. Just 26.7 points per game, 5.14 yards per play, 40.1% success rate. Granted, they were against good defenses, but I'm not going to let one game trick me into thinking Sawyer Robertson is a good quarterback. I had Baylor as a top bet against Texas Tech. That was because it was Sawyer Robertson returning to his hometown in Lubbock, Texas. It was an emotional game for him in front of his family and friends. If you look at his numbers on the year, it looks pretty good. Over 1,300 yards, 7.5 yards per attempt, 14 touchdowns, 3 picks. Keep in mind, 280 of these yards and 5 touchdowns came in that one Texas Tech game. Before that game, his numbers weren't looking nearly that good. Look, overall, I see this as a perfect sell high spot on Baylor. We won with them last week, +6 at Texas Tech. They should not be laying a full touchdown here. Oklahoma State should be able to move the ball. I took OK State +7. I even sprinkled the money line a little bit. Let's go Pokes. Next game. Next game up, we got MIZZ on the road in Tuscaloosa. Alabama is now laying 17. Total sitting at 51 or 51.5, depending on your sports book. Let's take a quick look at the pie charts, and according to the data, action's coming in on the Missouri side. Over 65% of the tickets, over 60% of the money. To be honest, I'm going to skip this one. I'm pretty sure Brady Cook is not going to be playing in this game, which is why the line moved from 13.5 to 17. The backup quarterback for Missouri is Drew Pine, and if you're a college football fan, you know who that is from his days at Notre Dame. Not exactly a guy I'd say I trust going on the road in Tuscaloosa. I'll just leave it at that. I'm not a big Drew Pine guy, so I can't take Missouri, but I'm not really trying to bet Alabama either. It's just going to be a pass. Next game. Next up, we got Texas Tech on the road at TCU. TCU laying 6.5 points at home, and this total is at 66.5. That's correct. 66.5 for the total. Take a look at the pie charts. According to this data, action's coming in heavily on the Texas Tech side. Over 90% of the money and over 90% of the tickets and about 90% of the money coming in on the Red Raiders. As I always say, take this data with a grain of salt. So let's get into this matchup. And if you're wondering why this total's at 66.5, well, if you're a Big 12 fan, you already know why. But if you're wondering why it's at 66.5, Texas Tech 24th in pass frequency, 10th in pace. TCU 7th in pass frequency, 32nd in pace. Both these teams throw the ball a lot, and they run at a really fast pace. And when they play, it's usually fireworks. So who's going to come out on top of this shootout? I will start with the Texas Tech offense. According to FEI ratings, they definitely have the advantage here, 56 to 82nd, and I agree. Texas Tech is 41st in yards per play, 32nd in PPA, 61st in success rate. Rushing numbers better than you'd expect. They've actually been running the ball recently, Texas Tech. They're 27th in yards per carry, 42nd in success rate per rush. Passing numbers not the most efficient, but they are sitting at 25th in effective pass. Now, when you look at the right side of this graphic at the TCU defense, these numbers are a little bit deceiving. It looks like they have a good pass defense. They really don't. I mean, they haven't seen a ton of passing attacks. They're 33rd in yards per pass attempt, 12th in success rate per dropback, all the way back at 65th in effective pass. Because like I said, they haven't seen a ton of passing attacks. They've been struggling to stop the run. 89th in yards per carry, 69th in success rate per rush, 74th in effective rush, which is huge because, as I said, Texas Tech has been running the ball recently. Baron Morton's numbers on the season looking pretty excellent. Over 1,900 yards passing, 7.1 yards per attempt, 17 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. You guys know how I feel about Baron Morton. Well, if you subscribe to this channel, you know how I feel about Baron Morton. I trust him in easy situations against bad defenses. In these road games, these road conference games, I don't trust him as much. That being said, this is a unique situation because TCU's defense is not good. So this might be a situation where we can trust Baron Morton to throw the ball. He hasn't been playing his best football as of late. Against Arizona and Baylor, just 6.75 yards per pass attempt, 38.3% success rate per dropback, 260 yards per game. For a team that drops back to pass as much as Texas Tech does, 260 passing yards per game is not great. But here's the thing. I kind of like this matchup for Morton here. Like I said before, this TCU defense, they have great numbers against the pass. But if you take a closer look, they got lit up by UCF in week 3. 230 passing yards allowed in the game, 10.5 yards per pass attempt, 45.8% success rate per dropback. If you look at the pass defense numbers from their other 6 games, it looks elite. Just 5.65 yards per pass attempt, 33.6% success rate per dropback, 150.3 passing yards allowed per game. Elite looking pass defense numbers, but look at the opponents. Stanford, okay, Ashton Daniels in the opener. LIU, I don't even know who that is. Andy put that in the graphic. I don't know who that is. SMU back early in the season before they got going. Kansas has Jalen Daniels, but that's a run-first offense all the way. Houston has no offense at all with Donovan Smith or Zion Chris or whoever the hell is playing quarterback now. Utah, I mean, the kin of Zach Wilson was playing quarterback in that game. So I know the pass defense numbers look great, and I'm not trying to take credit away from TCU, but I'm not so much sold that this is a good pass defense that can hold down Texas Tech. And like I said before, this TCU defense has been struggling against the run, and Texas Tech is running the football. On the season, they're averaging over 5 yards per carry as a team, 47%. Success rate per rush is excellent. In their last 2 games, it sputtered a bit. I mean, 4.16 yards per carry. 47.4% success rate per rush is still good. Arizona has a great defensive front this year as well. Both of these run defenses I would take before TCU's. Now, we did see TCU put up a great defensive effort against Utah, even on the ground. 2.62 yards per carry allowed, 27.3% success rate per rush. It was great. Not trying to take away. I mean, Utah can run the ball. I forget the RB's name, but they got a good back out there. Probably an easier offense to game plan for when Isaac Wilson is the quarterback. But still, let's give him some credit. Let's not forget, though, the 4 games before that, 225.5 rushing yards allowed per game, 48.8% success rate per rush, 5.21 yards per carry. So they played great defense against Utah, but before that, this team was getting cooked on the ground. By the way, they got cooked by Houston, one of the worst offenses in the conference. So I think Texas Tech is going to be able to run the ball. I also think Barron Morton's going to be able to throw the ball. I like this matchup for Texas Tech offensively. But what about on the other side? Obviously, this is the strength of the TCU team. Josh Hoover in the passing attack. One of the best passing attacks in the country, certainly top 25. They're 29th in yards per pass attempt, 20th in success rate per dropback, 7th in effective pass. TCU sitting at 33rd in OFEI. They're matched up against a Texas Tech defense that has really underperformed this season. 102nd in yards per play allowed, 92nd in success rate, 111th in PPA. At first glance, you might think there's no way Texas Tech can limit this TCU passing attack, and I don't blame you from looking at these numbers. That being said, we are seeing Josh Hoover come back down to earth a little bit. In his first 5 games, or this is TCU's passing numbers, they were averaging 364.8 passing yards per game, over 50% success rate per dropback, 8.9 yards per attempt. In their first 5 games, elite passing numbers. In their last 2, granted, they did see 2 very good defenses in Houston and Utah, but just 6.35 yards per pass attempt, 41.2% success rate per dropback, 248 passing yards per game. TCU needs that passing attack working. They can't function without that passing attack. These numbers are not going to cut. I know they won that Utah game, but the Houston game's a perfect example. They lost to Houston at home. They need the passing numbers to be better than this. Now, you can say Houston and Utah are both better than Texas Tech defensively, and you wouldn't be wrong in saying that. But Texas Tech isn't absolutely terrible. Also, they were dealing with some injuries earlier in the season. And look, I'm not trying to make a stand here for Texas Tech defensively, but we can say they played excellent defense in both their road games. Look at their numbers against the pass in their 2 road games against Washington State and Arizona. Just 208 passing yards allowed per game, 6.1 yards per pass attempt, 32.9% success rate per dropback. Now, does that translate to Texas Tech going on the road to TCU and shutting down Josh Hoover? No, but it's certainly a good sign, seeing that they've played great defense against the pass on the road. And let's be honest, Josh Hoover's probably not going to have any run support in this one. On the season, TCU's averaging just 3.5 yards per carry as a team, 101.9 rushing yards per game, 43.7% success rate per rush actually isn't bad, but this is not a great rushing attack. Texas Tech defensively against the run is okay. I mean, 4.75 yards per carry isn't great, but there were just 2 really bad games that are skewing their numbers. The Washington State and Baylor games, I mean, they gave up 278 rushing yards per game in those 2, over 7 yards per carry, 43% success rate per rush. And these 2 games are making Texas Tech's run defense look worse than it is. It's really not that bad. It's okay. But TCU can't run the ball anyway. It's going to come down to Josh Hoover throwing the ball in Texas Tech, and he should be able to. But I like the way Texas Tech has played defensively on the road. I like the matchup for Barron Morton, and I think Texas Tech's going to be able to run the ball. So I do not believe this number should be at 6.5. It's weird that those pie charts are saying Texas Tech is the heavy public side. I don't love that. They just got dusted by Baylor. I actually find that a little hard to believe that the public's coming in in heavy on Texas Tech on the road after getting crushed at home. But I'd be on the Red Raiders here. I'm actually going to bet this one. Give me Texas Tech plus 6.5 next game. Next up, we got BYU on the road at UCF. UCF is laying here, minus 2.5, total sitting down at 53.5. Take a look at the pie charts, and according to the data, as you could imagine, action's coming in pretty heavily on the BYU side. 75% of the tickets, 90% of the money on BYU. Take it with a grain of salt. So let's get into this matchup, and we'll start with the BYU offense against the UCF defense. UCF's defense this year, not that it's been bad. They've actually been strong against the run. They've definitely shown us that you can throw on them pretty easily, though, which isn't necessarily a bad thing for BYU. Retzlaff has shown us we can trust him. He can make throws. BYU's offense on the season, 25th in yards per play, 59th in success rate. Rushing, they're 30th in yards per carry, 59th in success rate per rush. Passing, 58th in yards per pass attempt, 63rd in success rate per dropback. Retzlaff on the season, 1,644 yards, 8 yards per attempt, 16 touchdowns, 7 interceptions. The way to rattle Retzy, put pressure on him. Significant drop-off in production when he's under pressure, but the good news is BYU's offensive line has been great in pass protection. Actually, this might be a top 25 pass protection here, and UCF's pass rush has been wildly disappointing. I thought entering the season that UCF was going to have some edge rushers. I mean, they're just 79th in pressure rate, 127th in sack rate. So Retzlaff should have time to throw in this game. UCF secondary has definitely shown us we cannot trust them if a quarterback has time to throw. So I think Retzy's going to throw the ball in this game. I think he's going to be able to put points on the board. As far as the run game, I know BYU has been running it the last 2 games. 201 rushing yards per game, 6.38 yards per carry, over 60% success rate per rush. I'm not trying to take credit away from BYU for that. You might look at those last 2 games and then look at UCF's last game. They got run on by Iowa State. They allowed 5.33 yards per carry, 47.8% success rate per rush, 256 yards on the ground. And you might be like, hey, BYU can run the ball in UCF here. I don't think so. I mean, UCF's defense has been strong against the run. In their first 6 games, they're allowing just 3.26 yards per carry, 28.8% success rate per rush, 91.3 rushing yards allowed per game. We do have to acknowledge that in their first 6 games, they didn't see a ton of rushing attacks. TCU, passing offense. Colorado, passing offense. Florida, kind of a passing offense too. Cincinnati, a little more balanced. Sam Houston State's a rushing offense. So yeah, you can look at these numbers. They're probably a little inflated based on the fact that they haven't seen a ton of rushing attacks. But this UCF run defense, I actually do trust it to an extent. BYU, not the greatest rushing attack, even though they were able to run the ball in the last 2 weeks. So I don't know if the run game necessarily will be there for BYU, but I do think Retzlaff can throw the ball in UCF. On the other side, we got UCF's offense, and actually not an easy matchup for BYU defensively. They're much stronger against the pass. 5th in yards per pass attempt allowed, 24th in success rate per dropback, 16th in effective pass. Not nearly as nice looking against the run. 54th, 79th, 45th. In case you're unfamiliar with Central Florida's offense, they run the ball early, often, and they're good at it. 13th in the country in yards per carry, 2nd in the country in success rate per rush, 4th in effective rush. I mean, some advanced metrics has this as a top 5 rushing attack in the country. Last week against Iowa State, who, by the way, is a top 25 defense, they rushed for 354 yards, over 9 yards per carry, 48.7% success rate per rush. This is a dangerous rushing attack, and we saw Oklahoma State running the ball on BYU last week. 269 yards on the ground, 67% success rate per rush, 7.27 yards per carry. And this is Oklahoma State, who hasn't been able to run the ball all year. Ollie Gordon's having a terrible season. He was able to break out. Not just Ollie Gordon, though. Oklahoma State was running on him, period. I will say, though, as far as UCF's offense, they've become even more one-dimensional since benching KJ Jefferson. You can see the passing numbers in his 5 starts. 8.9 yards per attempt, 206.8 passing yards per game, 38.6% success rate per dropback. So it wasn't good, but I mean, since they benched him in the 2 games Brown started, just 5.75 yards per pass attempt, 32.8% success rate per dropback. So benching KJ Jefferson, UCF is just such a one-dimensional offense now. They're running the ball. That's all they're going to do. It almost doesn't matter, though, because even if KJ Jefferson was playing in this game, they wouldn't be able to throw the ball on BYU. This is one of the best pass defenses in the country. They're allowing less than 5 yards per pass attempt on the season. So, I mean, regardless who's at quarterback for UCF, they're not going to be able to throw the ball in this game. I do think they'll be able to run it, though, which is why I can't take BYU. I know it looks appetizing, that plus 2.5. I think there's going to be points in the game, so I lean towards the over, problem is this total's been bet down from 55.5 to 53.5. So clearly the market's seeing this one a lot differently than I am. This is indicative of a low-scoring UCF win. I personally seeing it as a high-scoring BYU win. So maybe I'm off here. But my favorite bet, I'm not the type of person that's scared to bet against the market, so give me BYU team total over 25.5 in this one. Next up, Texas on the road in Vandy. Vanderbilt catching 18.5 points at home, total sitting at 51.5. Take a look at the pie charts, and according to the data, action's coming in pretty even on this one, about 50-50 in terms of the tickets. Money coming in towards Texas, though, over 70%. Take this data with a grain of salt. So let's get into this matchup, and we'll start with the Texas offense against the Vanderbilt defense, and this is why the line is 18.5 right here. There's nothing that indicates Vanderbilt can stop Quinn Ewers from piecing them up. Obviously, as I'm sure you know, Texas one of the best passing attacks in the country. 17th in yards per pass attempt, 45th in success rate per dropback, 14th in effective pass. This Vanderbilt secondary's been struggling all year. 84th, 105th, and 89th against the pass. Yes, I know the Texas offense looked awful last week. Just 15 points, 3.41 yards per play. Nothing at all like we've seen in their first 6 games. The passing production was way down from 9.62 yards per attempt and just about 50% success rate per dropback down to 4.7 and 25.9%. They were playing Georgia, and not just Georgia. They were playing a pissed-off Georgia team. Everyone wrote the Bulldogs off because they lost to Alabama. That was just wild that they were catching so many points in that game. Georgia's the best team in college football, and they have been for about 5 years now. So, I mean, catching 5 points, the loss to Alabama, you just had the best team in college football pissed off. So it was just a terrible spot for the Texas offense. You can say a little bit about the fact that Texas hasn't played the toughest competition, but still, I'm not going to let this one game against Georgia shake my confidence in the Texas passing attack. There's playmakers there. Quinn Ewers is an NFL quarterback. Ewers should have no problem making throws on this Vanderbilt defense. I mean, Vanderbilt was struggling to make stops through the air against Drones and Milroe. Not to take anything away from those two guys, but their athleticism is a big part of their skill set. In terms of a thrower, Quinn Ewers is a step above these guys. In those 2 games, Vandy allowed 316 passing yards per game, over 54% success rate per dropback, 11.2 yards per attempt. This Vanderbilt defense is not good against the pass, and Quinn Ewers in the Texas passing attack is about as good as it gets. I mean, top 5, top 10 in the country. Texas should go off here. The question is, on the other side, is Texas able to stop Vanderbilt's run game? Because that's what Vanderbilt does. Diego Pavia, same thing he did at New Mexico State. They want to run the ball. He's an athletic guy. He's capable of making plays with his arm, but this is an offense that wants to run the ball with Jerry Kill. On the season, they're just 93rd in yards per carry, but they're 62nd in success rate per rush, which isn't bad. They're sitting at 32nd in effective rush. I mean, they're going to have their hands full here against Texas. Texas defensively is top 5. I mean, look at all the green on this graphic. They're actually sitting at first in DFEI. So FEI ratings has Texas as the best defense in the country. The talent discrepancy on the defensive front here just might be too much for Vanderbilt. Texas defensive line, elite pass rush, elite against the run, 28th in line yards, 20th in stuff rate. Vanderbilt's offensive line has not played particularly well, just 97th in line yards, 117th in stuff rate. They're also struggling in pass protection, so Texas is coming for Pavia. And let's be honest, between Diego Pavia at quarterback, between beating Alabama, we all kind of have a false idea of what this Vanderbilt offense has been doing. The truth is they haven't been very good. In their 6 FBS games against Georgia State, Virginia Tech, Missouri, Alabama, Kentucky, Ball State, they're averaging just 3.4 yards per carry. 35.4% success rate per rush. So I know they're staying competitive in games, and I'm not trying to say they've been terrible, but the idea that this Vanderbilt run game is good, I mean, I'd say that's probably not very accurate. It hasn't been very good at all. And in case you're wondering, Texas against the run this year, they're allowing 3.15 yards per carry, 36% success rate per rush. So yeah, I understand why the line's 18.5, and on paper, Texas should roll them, especially coming off the loss. I mean, I expect Texas to win big. The problem is this Vanderbilt team, they've got the magic. You know what I'm saying? When teams just don't even play well but still find a way to either win or keep it interesting. So I'm not jumping at the idea to lay a big number to this Vanderbilt team. So as of right now, I don't have a bet down on this game. But if you're asking me what I think will happen, according to the numbers, Texas should win comfortably here. So Texas minus 18.5. I'll let you know on the live show if I bet this one. As of right now, I only have about 7 bets open, so I'm still searching. We'll talk about it on the live show. Next game. Next up, we got Florida State on the road in Miami, and the Canes are now laying 3 touchdowns. 21. Wow. Miami's laying 21 in this one. Total sitting at 54.5. Let's take a look at the pie charts, and according to the data, as you would expect, action is coming in heavily on the Miami side. Over 75% of the tickets, over 90% of the money coming in on the Canes. Take it with a grain of salt, although I would say that's probably accurate in this instance. So let's get into this matchup, and we'll start with the mismatch. I mean, Florida State offensively is a mismatch against anyone. They've been absolutely dreadful. They're 127th in the country in yards per play, 128th in success rate. They can't run it. They can't throw it. They can't do anything. Now, Miami defensively, this is clearly the weakness of their team. I know the numbers look pretty good, but we've seen pretty clearly you can make plays on this Miami defense, and we're seeing it recently as Miami's starting to play some tougher competition. So there's opportunities to make plays against Miami's defense. The question is Florida State's offense capable of making those plays? Since the quarterback change, we haven't really seen a boost in production. Glenn has started 2 games now. Florida State's still averaging just 14.5 points per game in those 2, 4.16 yards per play, 33.8% success rate is not good. I will cut him a little bit of slack. He played Clemson and Duke, 2 very good defenses. In fact, this game against Miami, I know this sounds crazy, on the road to Miami, it's probably going to be Glenn's easiest defensive competition since he took over as starter. Because like I said, this Miami defense a little bit overvalued. The offense, we can't poke holes in. That passing offense is about as good as it gets in college football. But defensively, I'm not huge on this Miami team. Miami's defense racked up some really nice-looking numbers through the first 4 games when they played some ugly competition. Well, Florida's in there. They deserve credit for that one. But an FCS opponent, Ball State, South Florida, they were allowing just 10.3 points per game, 31% success rate, 3.87 yards per play, looking like an elite defense. In their last 3 games, now that they're seeing some tougher offenses, Virginia Tech, Cal, Louisville, Miami's allowing 39 points per game in these 3. Still just a 38.7% success rate, which is solid, meaning they're allowing some big plays. 6.58 yards per play allowed is a lot. So again, the opportunities are going to be there for Brock Glenn to make big plays in this game. The question is, do you trust Brock Glenn to make those throws? Do you trust him to make those plays? I would say based on what we've seen, we'd have to lean towards no on that question. But personally, I'm not going to pretend that I know everything about Brock Glenn. If you're a Florida State fan, or if you know more about this kid, maybe he's got potential. I mean, he took over the starting job. He's played Clemson and Duke. It's not exactly a great situation for a quarterback to be thrown in. This Miami defense has shown us you can make plays on him. So if you're a Brock Glenn guy, this could be the game you put some faith in him. But the real matchup to watch is going to be on the other side. As we know, Miami might be the best offense in the country. They're first in yards per play, 3rd in success rate. This is one of the best passing offenses we've seen in college football in several years, probably since Joe Burrow and LSU. I mean, it looks that good. They're 3rd in yards per pass attempt, 6th in success rate per dropback, 2nd in effective pass. Miami offensively sitting 5th in OFEI. Cam Ward having a Heisman Trophy caliber season, over 2,500 yards, 10.3 yards per attempt, 24 touchdowns, 5 interceptions, a big-time throw rate. So he's not Dylan Gabrieling it. He's not Bo Nixing it. He's making big plays with his arm. It's really impressive. I didn't even realize he was this good. I watched a lot of Cam Ward at Washington State. I didn't even know he had this in him. He truly looks like an NFL caliber thrower of the football. Certainly doesn't hurt that he probably has the best receiving core in college football with those guys at Miami, but I mean, he looks unstoppable. I will say there is one aspect of Florida State's team that's living up to the hype, that's actually playing the way they were supposed to play entering the season. It's the pass rush. They're 32nd in the country in pressure rate, 16th in sack rate. So this Florida State pass rush is real. It looks like a top 25 pass rush. So they're coming for Cam Ward. The problem is, I mean, Cam Ward's been great under pressure. Louisville has a pass rush too. Would Miami score 70 points in that game? So, I mean, Cam Ward hasn't really shown us signs that we should let a pass rush scare us off him. He seems to handle whatever's thrown his way. But it's something. If you're looking to bet Florida State here, this pass rush might be able to put pressure on Cam Ward. And like I said, this Florida State defense is coming around. We haven't really noticed it because the offense has been so bad that we're all kind of like, Florida State, they suck. And they do. But defensively, I mean, look at their pass defense numbers in the last 2 games. Against Clemson, obviously one of the best offenses in the country. And Duke, they have Malik Murphy, great quarterback. In those 2 games, just 4.9 yards per pass attempt allowed, 37.5% success rate per dropback, under 153 passing yards allowed per game. This Florida State defense is coming around, which leads me to, I can't believe I'm about to say these words, I think we need to dip our toes back in the pool. 21 is too many. We got to do it. We got to go back to the Noles. I might hate myself for it. I'm sure the comments are going to hate this one. Give me Florida State plus the 3 touchdowns. Noles up. I'm back. I'm back, baby. Florida State plus 21 next game.
Something I forgot to mention, and I already turned the camera off. We've seen Cam Ward make mistakes. As good as he's been, we saw in that Virginia Tech game, the strength of the Virginia Tech defense is the pass rush. We saw him gift a couple interceptions in that game. So maybe Florida State's pass rush can force Cam Ward to make some mistakes. As bad as Florida State's been, they still have talent in that secondary. I think Cam Ward can throw us a pick or two. And if you're laying 21 points, 3 full touchdowns, can't be throwing picks. Noles.
Next up, we got Utah on the road at Houston. Houston catching 4.5 points at home. Total sitting all the way down at 36.5 or 37, depending on your sports book. Let's take a look at the pie charts, and according to the data, action's coming in pretty heavily on the Utah side. 80% of the tickets, 90% of the money on the Utes. But as I always say, take this data with a grain of salt. So let's get into this one, and I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this matchup. There's a reason the total's all the way down at 36.5. We probably won't see a ton of offense here. This Utah offense looks awful. Cam Rising came back momentarily. It didn't look any better. In fact, it looked worse in that Arizona State game. Utah on the season, 92nd in yards per play, 106 in success rate, no passing offense whatsoever. Even the run game hasn't really been there for Utah. 64th in yards per carry, 84th in success rate. They're matched up against a Houston defense that I think is pretty good. The numbers don't really show it because the offense has been so bad that it keeps putting the defense in bad situations. But this is definitely a good defense. I think this is close to a top 30, top 35 defense in the country. They're 55th in yards per play, 47th in success rate, 77th in yards per carry allowed, 38th in success rate per rush. And look, straight up, there's just no way I can lay 4.5 points on the road with this Utah team. They can't move the ball. In the last 3 games, they're averaging 12 points per game. 12. 4.95 yards per play. 32.3% success rate is awful. Granted, Arizona State's a solid defense, but TCU, that's a terrible defense. Arizona's defense is okay. I mean, 12 points per game, 4.95 yards per play. This offense is terrible. And I know they're playing these games without their star quarterback. Cam Rising's been hurt. I get it. But they can't even run the ball. In their last 3 games, just 3.32 yards per carry as a team, 36.5% success rate per rush, 97.3 rushing yards per game. I mean, with Isaac Wilson at quarterback, 97 rushing yards per game, you're not going to win many football games, let alone cover -4.5 on the road. I will say I am a little concerned that the Houston defense has not been playing well. In their last 3 games, they're allowing 27 points per game, 48.4% success rate, 6.75 yards per play. They've had some tough competition. Kansas, we know, has a high-powered offense. TCU, one of the best passing attacks in the country. Iowa State, one of the best teams in the conference. So they've seen some tougher opponents recently. But you know what? That Iowa State game, they held them to 20 points, and it was 13. They broke an 80-yard run at the end of the game. So, I mean, this is still a good defense, even though, like I said before, the numbers don't exactly show it. At home, I don't think Houston will have any problem holding this Utah offense down. The problem is, on the other side, how can we rely on Houston to score on this Utah defense? This is most definitely a top 25 defense, maybe even a top 15 defense. They're 13th in DFEI. Against the run, 45th in yards per carry, 10th in success rate per rush, 31st in effective rush. They're actually stronger against the pass, which is basically all Houston. I mean, Houston can't do anything offensively. I guess Donovan Smith is back at quarterback. They switched to Zion Chris, then went back to Donovan Smith. This Houston offense is a mess. So I can't take Houston plus the points either. If you put a gun to my head and force me to place a bet on this game, I would just play that super low total under 37. I know it seems crazy, but the score, these 2 teams are not scoring points, and these are 2 good defenses. So I do think it stays under 37 next game. Michigan State, Michigan in the big house. Michigan laying 3.5 points at home. Total sitting at 40.5. Let's take a look at the pie charts. According to the data, action coming in on the Michigan side, over 55% of the tickets, over 70% of the money on the Wolverines. Take this data with a grain of salt. So let's get into this matchup, and we'll start with the Michigan State offense against the Michigan defense. Now, you might look at these numbers and be like, Michigan State's got no shot here. They're not going to be able to move the ball in Michigan. And, I mean, just looking at this graphic here, it may appear that way. I mean, Michigan's defense, certainly a top 25 unit on the road at the big house. I could see it. I could see how you would think that. But Aiden Childs is starting to develop into an NFL talent in front of our eyes. 1,468 yards, 8 yards per attempt, 6 touchdowns, 10 interceptions. I know. 10 interceptions is crazy. And this Michigan defensive front does have a pass rush. 60th in pressure rate, 64th in sack rate. Michigan State has struggled in pass protection, 125th in pressure rate, 71st in sack rate. Aiden Childs has struggled when pressured. F QB rating, F turnover worthy play rate under pressure. I get it. I get how you would be worried here. But here's the thing. Look at Aiden Childs' last 3 opponents. Iowa, Oregon, and Ohio State. 3 top 10 defenses, maybe even 3 top 5 defenses. I know it sounds crazy, but Michigan's defense might be a breath of fresh air for Aiden Childs, who's played 3 of the best defenses in the country back to back to back. And by the way, he's been making plays on those defenses. Look at Michigan State's passing numbers in their last 3 games against Ohio State, Oregon, and Iowa. 8.4 yards per pass attempt, 43.7% success rate per dropback, 215.3 passing yards per game. And I know you're worried about the interceptions. He's only thrown 2 in these 3 games. He had a 3 interception game and then a 4 interception game or something early in the season. In these 3 games against elite defenses, he's got 2 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. He is making plays on these defenses, and I would classify all 3 of these defenses as better than Michigan's defense. So don't be surprised if Aiden Childs is able to make plays here on the road in the Big House. But what about the other side? We got the Michigan offense. If you've watched Michigan football this year, you know what it is. The quarterback situation is a nightmare. This is an offense that needs to run the ball. They're 18th in rushing frequency. They've been pretty good at it. They're 38th in yards per carry, 34th in success rate per rush, 13th in effective rush. Michigan State has played solid defense against the run, though. 54th in yards per carry, 25th in success rate per rush, 54th in effective rush. Yeah, they've struggled a little bit against the pass. In fact, we don't even know who the quarterback's going to be for Michigan this week. Now, in terms of the Michigan rushing attack, they're efficient. 49.3% success rate per rush is very good. Just 3.75 yards per carry. I was talking about this last week. The big runs that we saw against USC to beat the Trojans in that game haven't really been there. Haven't really been breaking the big plays, but they are getting their 4 or 5 yard carries. Just 147.7 rushing yards per game, though. Not great considering you don't have a passing attack. Now, you can point to the Michigan State run defense and say, hey, they racked up all their numbers early in the season against bad teams. You wouldn't be wrong in saying that. Michigan State in their first 4 games, just 2.61 yards per carry allowed, 32% success rate per rush, under 97 rushing yards allowed per game. In their last 3 games, yeah, they've been getting run on. 5.59 yards per carry, 43% success rate per rush. That's actually not too bad. 177 rushing yards per game. But again, look at the opponents. Ohio State, Oregon, and Iowa. All 3 teams that have much, much, much better offenses than Michigan. And yes, I'm saying Iowa has a much better offense than Michigan. In fact, if you go by FEI ratings, Ohio State is 1 in the country, the best offense in the country. Oregon is 2. Iowa, I think they're like 51st or something, but they're 10th in effective rush. So 3 top 10 rushing attacks in a row. Like I said before, this Michigan matchup is a breath of fresh air for Michigan State. They've been through the absolute gauntlet. I don't think any team in college football has been through a schedule that comes close to this. And when it comes to Michigan's quarterback situation, I mentioned it before, we don't even know who's going to be playing quarterback. I think the Jack Tuttle era is over already. I'm reading that they might be making another quarterback change. This will be their 4th quarterback of the season. Jack Tuttle in his 2 games, I mean, it's not working. 30 of 50, 306 yards, a touchdown, 2 picks. 110 passer rating on the college football scale is terrible. So I don't even know who's going to be playing quarterback for Michigan in this game, which is why it's got to be Sparty here. I know that sounds crazy. Michigan is the better team here. Michigan has the better roster, top to bottom, but the most important position is quarterback, and the gap between Aiden Childs, who's developing into an NFL talent before our eyes, and whoever Michigan is going to have out there at quarterback is insane. So getting 3.5 points, I think Michigan State could win, honestly. Coming into this game with confidence, coming off a big win, Michigan State's got a bright future, and there's a lot of positive vibes surrounding Sparty right now. Meanwhile, Michigan, I mean, that game against Illinois was disgusting. So give me Sparty. Give me Sparty to upset them in the Big House. Michigan State plus 3.5 next game. So actually, while I was recording this video, the number moved from 3.5, 4 to 4.5, 5, and I found a 5.5. That was enough for me. I was leaning towards Michigan State. I did it. I put a few dollars on Sparty here. Michigan State plus 5.5 next game. Next up is West Virginia, Arizona, and I don't know what's going on with this line. I don't know if I'm missing something. Arizona is laying 4.5 points. In what world? And the line's moving towards them. It doesn't even make sense. I'm so way off on this one. I think West Virginia is the significantly better team, but we'll get into it. Total for this one sitting at 51.5. Let's take a look at the pie charts. And according to the data, action's coming in on the Arizona side. I don't even know what's going on. Are we in a twilight zone? Why are people betting Arizona? Over 70% of the tickets, over 80% of the money coming in on Arizona. I know West Virginia's been bad, but Arizona is next level bad. Whatever, let's get into this one. Start with the West Virginia offensive matchup here against Arizona's defense. Now, Arizona's defense has actually surprised me and has been, I guess, pretty good. I won't say they're a great defense, but it's a pretty solid defense by Arizona standards. This is a program that usually has a terrible defense. That's not the case this year. The defense has been okay. West Virginia, as we know, they're going to run the football. They're 29th in OFEI, basically all on the back of their rushing attack. 60th in yards per carry, 50th in success rate per rush, 12th in effective rush. Arizona's been okay defensively against the run recently. In their last 4 games, 125.8 rushing yards allowed per game, 45.6% success rate per rush isn't great, 4.19 yards per carry. I mean, these are okay numbers against the run. That being said, if you look at their opponents, I mean, Texas Tech can run the ball. BYU can run it a little bit. Colorado never runs the ball. Utah's offense is terrible. They haven't seen the toughest competition in terms of a rushing attack. West Virginia, a much stronger rushing attack than any of these 4 teams. And we're talking about a West Virginia offense that's coming off its worst performance of the season. Last week against Kansas State, just 152 yards on the ground, 3.53 yards per carry, 28.9% success rate per rush. We know this West Virginia rushing attack is much better than this. Look at their 3 games before that. 229.3 rushing yards per game, 5.38 yards per carry, 48.8% success rate per rush. So I expect the West Virginia offense to bounce back here. And even though the Arizona defense has been decent against the run, they haven't seen a rushing attack like West Virginia. And also, this is a West Virginia offense that's actually played really well in their 2 road games this year against Pitt and Oklahoma State. They're averaging 36 points per game in those 2, over 6.1 yards per play, 44% success rate. So they played really well on the road. Yeah, I expect West Virginia to bounce back offensively. They should be able to run the ball in Arizona in this one. And when we flip it over to the other side, this is where it gets crazy, because West Virginia's pass defense is terrible. 129th in yards per pass attempt allowed, 117th in success rate per dropback, 122nd in effective pass. This is an awful pass defense, but Arizona can't do anything offensively recently. On the season, they're 52nd in yards per play, 56th in yards per carry, 85th in yards per pass attempt. Coming into the season, Noah Fafita with McMillan, we were expecting this to be this dangerous Big 12 passing attack. It hasn't. It's actually been awful. 98th in success rate per dropback. It really puts us in a tough spot with this game because, like I said, this West Virginia pass defense has been so bad. In their last 5 games, they're allowing over 9.1 yards per pass attempt, 247.8 passing yards per game, 47.9% success rate per dropback. But Arizona's passing attack has been just as bad. In their last 5 games, they're averaging just 5.9 yards per pass attempt, 37.8% success rate per dropback. Fafita's been awful this year. I believe he has more interceptions than touchdowns this season. I mean, the passing attack just isn't there. How many games until we're deep enough into the season to say this just isn't working? This offense doesn't work without Jed Fish. I think we're deep enough. I don't trust this Arizona passing attack at all, even against a bad West Virginia defense. In those same last 5 games, they're averaging just 15.6 points per game. 15.6. 37.4% success rate, 5.14 yards per play. I mean, I think we've seen enough where I could come out and say Arizona's offense is bad. This is a bad offense. It's not working. And even against a West Virginia pass defense that is terrible, I like how this West Virginia team's coming off a bad offensive performance. I like how they've played well offensively on the road, coming off back-to-back losses, prime time to bounce back, although you could say the same thing about Arizona. I personally think we're getting the better team, plus 4.5, so I don't know what I'm missing. I don't know why the market's buying this number up. I have this close to a pick'em, so I mean, I'm way off here. Maybe I'm the biggest sucker in the world. West Virginia should win this game. West Virginia plus 4.5, and I'll probably hit the money line too. Next game. Next up, Penn State is on the road up in Madison. Wisconsin catching 6.5 points at home, total sitting at 47.5. Let's take a quick look at the pie charts, and according to the data, action's coming in pretty heavily on the Penn State side. Over 75% of the tickets and about 85% of the money coming in on Penn State. Take it with a grain of salt. So let's get into this matchup, and Wisconsin has definitely struggled with Penn State 4 in a row. Penn State's 4-0 straight up, 4-0 against the spread in their last 4 matchups against Wisconsin, but we're not interested in the past. Let's talk about this matchup. Wisconsin's defense coming around 19th in the country in DFEI, 31st in yards per play, 27th in success rate. Numbers against the pass look elite. 15th in yards per pass attempt, 13th in success rate per dropback, 5th in effective pass. Not quite as nice looking against the run, 75th, 55th, and 28th. Definitely not the weakness you want to have going into the Penn State game with those two backs they got. But you know what? Drew Aller's playing great too. 1,492 yards, 10.2 yards per attempt, 11 touchdowns, 4 picks. Having a great season. Penn State's been throwing the ball all year. 270 passing yards per game, 10.32 yards per pass attempt, 55% success rate per dropback. And the criticism of Drew Aller and the Penn State passing attack was they haven't thrown on any legitimate defenses. Well, they answered that. When they went on the road to the West Coast out in USC, they came from behind to win that game, and Drew Aller was making some throws. So this is definitely a passing attack we can trust. But like I said before, Wisconsin's been really strong against the pass. Look at their numbers against the pass in their 4 Big Ten games. 152.5 passing yards allowed per game, 30.4% success rate per dropback, 4.68 yards per pass attempt. They've been elite against the pass so far this year. Now, I will say, of their 4 Big Ten games, I mean, only USC is capable of throwing the ball. They've played some really bad Big Ten offenses, so that's something we have to consider. But still, we don't want to take away credit from Wisconsin. They've played very good defense against the pass. The question is going to be, can Wisconsin stop Penn State from running the ball? And you know what? I mean, Penn State hasn't had the dominant rushing attack we were expecting. In their last 2 games against UCLA and USC, they're averaging just 3.33 yards per carry. 45.9% success rate per rush indicates they are getting their 4-yard carries, their 5-yard carries, so they're not getting stuffed at the line of scrimmage. But the big plays on the ground haven't really been there for Penn State. And you know what? Let's give Wisconsin some more credit. They've done a pretty solid job against the run as well. Just 4.3 yards per carry allowed in their Big Ten games, 36% success rate per rush. Again, Purdue, Rutgers, Northwestern. Well, Purdue and Rutgers have decent rushing attacks. Still, we have to point out they've played some bad Big Ten offenses. So as a whole on this side of the ball, I do think Penn State's offense is Wisconsin's toughest test so far. Their toughest test since Alabama, basically. So I'm sure they'll get caught off guard and Penn State will make some plays. But I am impressed with what Wisconsin's done defensively. So they do deserve some credit. And I think Penn State might be surprised and struggle to get the run game going in this one. It's when we flip it over to the other side. This is where I think we find value on Penn State. Wisconsin's offense may struggle in this one. Not that it's been bad. They're 48th in yards per play, 30th in success rate, 30th in yards per carry, 23rd in success rate per rush, 34th in effective rush. The run game's been okay. Passing attack, decent at best. I mean, Braden Locke has had his moments. He's played some bad defenses. When he saw Alabama, he looked terrible. In case you haven't watched college football this season, Penn State's defense is for real. They're 8th in the country in yards per play, 4th in success rate. They're elite against the run, elite against the pass. Wisconsin's really going to struggle to keep Braden Locke protected in the pocket in this one. Now, the offensive line has been good in pass protection. They're actually 9th in the country in pressure rate allowed, but they haven't seen a ton of good pass rushes. And we saw in the Alabama game, Braden Locke was struggling there against that pass rush. You might be able to make the argument that Penn State's defensive front is even better than Alabama's. They've been excellent against the run. They've been excellent pressuring the passer. Braden Locke is going to be in a situation here. Look at his splits when pressured. I mean, B+, 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 B+ when given a clean pocket. There's a lot of F's there on the right side when he's been under pressure. So this is a nightmare matchup for Braden Locke and the Wisconsin passing attack. Now, you might look at Braden Locke's numbers over the last 4 games and be like, Kyle, he hasn't played that bad. And if you look at the 4 games together, it looks like he hasn't. In his last 4 games against Big Ten opponents, 235.3 passing yards per game, 8.38 yards per attempt, 45.2% success rate per dropback. They look pretty good, right? Braden Locke's been good. Well, he did all of his damage against Purdue and Rutgers. Against Purdue and Rutgers, 2 terrible defenses. He averaged over 300 passing yards per game, 53.3% success rate per dropback, 9.95 yards per attempt. Against USC and Northwestern, 2 better defenses, he wasn't good at all. Just 35.5% success rate per dropback, 6.8 yards per pass attempt. Remember, in that Northwestern game, Wisconsin blocked a punt, blocked a field goal, and Northwestern fumbled on their own 3. So all 3 of those things happened in that game, and Wisconsin still only had 23 points. That offense wasn't doing much against Northwestern's defense. Northwestern stupidity is what gave Wisconsin 23 points. So I don't trust Braden Locke against a good defense at all, and Penn State might be the best defense in the country. On the season, they're allowing just 5.48 yards per pass attempt, 33.1% success rate per dropback. I don't trust Braden Locke at all in these spots. Now, you might say Wisconsin's going to be able to run the ball on Penn State. I mean, in their last 3 games, they're averaging 5.68 yards per carry, 47.2% success rate per rush, 246 rushing yards per game. That's against Purdue, Rutgers, Northwestern's respectable, but Purdue and Rutgers are the 2 worst run defenses in the Big Ten. I don't even think that's close. They're the 2 worst run defenses in the Big Ten by far. Penn State is an elite run defense, maybe the best run defense in the country. I know they allowed 7.88 yards per carry against USC, but that's because they broke a couple long runs, just a 35% success rate per rush. USC wasn't consistently running the ball on Penn State like that, and if you look at Penn State's numbers against the run in their first 5 games, I mean, 2.48 yards per carry allowed, 30% success rate per rush. This is an elite run defense. Wisconsin's probably not going to be able to run the ball, which means I would have to be on Penn State in this one. The reason I haven't bet this one, because I think under a touchdown you have to take Penn State. The reason I haven't bet it, Penn State's got Ohio State on deck. The biggest game of the season for Penn State is next week. Ohio State, the team they never beat, their white whale. So it's the look ahead spot of all look ahead spots for Penn State. So Penn State minus 6.5. If you don't believe in look ahead spots and you think that stuff's stupid, lay the 6.5. I personally am a little scared. Next, we're headed down to the SEC. LSU on the road at Texas A&M. A&M laying 1 point at home, total sitting at 54.5. Let's take a look at the pie charts, and according to the data, action's coming in pretty heavily on the LSU side. Over 80% of the tickets, over 70% of the money. But as I always say, take this data with a grain of salt. So let's get into this one, and if you take a look at this graphic, it looks like you see a lot of purple, right? It looks like LSU's gotten the better of Texas A&M, and that's true. I mean, they're 10-1 against the spread in their last 11 matchups, but look at the game specifically at Kyle Field. Texas A&M has won 3 in a row. 3-0 in their last 3 matchups against LSU at home. You got to go all the way back to 2016 to find the last time LSU won here. So A&M has been beating LSU on their home field. But how do they match up this year? We know this LSU team is trying to throw the ball. They're 9th in pass frequency, and they've been really good at it. 37th in the country in yards per pass attempt, 8th in success rate, 1st in effective pass. This offense is sitting at 3rd in OFEI. Nussmeier's done a great job stepping into the shoes of Jaden Daniels. Maybe not as athletic as Jaden Daniels, but in terms of throwing the ball, he's been excellent. Over 2,200 yards, 7.8 yards per attempt, 18 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. I will say something that concerns me a little when it comes to LSU's passing attack. We're seeing the production dip a little bit. In the first 5 games, they were averaging 337 passing yards per game, over 54% success rate per dropback, 8.32 yards per attempt. But in their last 2 games against Ole Miss and Arkansas, just 6.65 yards per pass attempt, 286 passing yards per game. So the passing production starting to dip a little bit now that they're seeing some tougher defenses. Definitely don't like that because this Texas A&M defense is definitely a tough defense, especially against the pass. In their last 3 games against Missouri, Arkansas, and Mississippi State, they're allowing just 6.23 yards per pass attempt, 32.6% success rate per dropback. So teams have really struggled throwing the ball in this Texas A&M defense. Now, something I like for LSU here, this is probably the best pass protection in college football. 10th in pressure rate, 5th in sack rate, 15th in pass block grade. This was tweeted out by Pro Football Focus, the college football division of that. The current starting offensive line for LSU has allowed 0 sacks this year, literally 0, which isn't shocking. This was one of the best pass protections in college football last year, and they brought back, I think, 4 starters on that offensive line. So shouldn't come as a shock that this LSU offensive line is elite in terms of keeping Nussmeier protected, and that's huge because Nussmeier has struggled with pressure. D in QB rating, F in yards per attempt. I mean, when you give this dude a clean pocket, he will kill you, but put pressure on him and he could definitely make some mistakes. So overall, I'm a little worried about the dip in production from the LSU passing attack. I'm also worried that they might not have run support here. In their 3 SEC games, they're averaging just 4.09 yards per carry, 38.4% success rate per rush. And this is a Texas A&M defense that's looking great against the run. They started off slow in their first 2 games, 5.25 yards per carry allowed, but just a 30.6% success rate per rush anyway. Look at their last 5 games against Florida, Bowling Green, Arkansas, Missouri, Mississippi State. They're allowing 3.01 yards per carry as a team, just 37.8% success rate per dropback. It looks like Mike Elko brought his elite run defense from Duke and brought it over to Texas A&M. This is a great run defense, and I don't think Nussmeier's going to have run support in this one. But what about on the other side? Let's take a look at Texas A&M's offense, and this is a really tough unit to get a read on because Wegman was hurt, and the offense looked completely different without him out there. Like, you look at this, 11th in run frequency. We know Texas A&M is not a run-first. Well, they're balanced, but the reason it says that is when Connor Wegman was out and Marcel Reed was playing quarterback, all they did was run the ball. So it's skewing the numbers. So when we pull up these numbers here, I mean, I really don't know what to make of them. Because we've actually seen 3 chapters of Texas A&M's offense this year. Chapter 1, Wegman looks terrible at Notre Dame. Then Wegman gets hurt. Chapter 2 was the Marcel Reed era. We're now in Chapter 3. Wegman returns, and all of a sudden he looks excellent. That's the chapter we're in now for Texas A&M. They're matched up against an LSU defense that's been great against the run. They're actually first in effective rush defensively, LSU. This defense, 29th in yards per carry, 28th in success rate per rush. The weakness of this LSU defense has been defending the pass. 93rd in yards per pass attempt allowed, 104th in success rate per dropback, 79th in effective pass. This has been a bad passing defense. And when you look at this graphic here, you're looking at the right side for Texas A&M. You're like, hey, this Texas A&M team likes to run the ball. They're 11th in run frequency. They're better at it. This is a bad matchup for them. We know that's not exactly true. The Texas A&M passing numbers look terrible in the Marcel Reed games. Just 171 passing yards per game, 35.4% success rate per dropback. But look at the Texas A&M passing numbers from their last 2 games since Connor Wegman has returned from injury. 246.5 passing yards per game, 52% success rate per dropback, 10.6 yards per pass attempt. I mean, since returning from injury, he's looking like the Connor Wegman we expected to see when we entered this season. The NFL hopeful kid, the kid that had a shot at getting drafted. He's starting to look like that. Now, we do have to mention that LSU's terrible numbers against the pass are definitely skewed a bit from week 1. They played USC, and Miller Moss had a big game. They let up 378 yards through the air, 62.2% success rate, 10.5 yards per attempt. Since then, they haven't been quite as bad. 7.35 yards per attempt, 40.4% success rate. But if you look at their opponents, they also haven't seen a ton of passing attacks either. So that might explain that. I mean, they saw Ole Miss. They did a great job against Ole Miss. They won that game. Arkansas with Taylon Green. I mean, Connor Wegman and Texas A&M, especially at Kyle Field, it's looking like a pretty dangerous passing attack. The main reason LSU's numbers are climbing against the pass is the pass rush. 13th in pressure rate, 6th in sack rate, 12th in pass rush grade. They've been pressuring the passer. That being said, Connor Wegman, weirdly good numbers when pressured. He's been handling pressure well. We're talking about a small sample size here. He missed a couple of games, but he's been handling pressure well. Now, one thing I'll say in favor of LSU, I don't think we're going to see this again. Texas A&M ran the ball all over Mizzou in their last home game, 6.56 yards per carry, 236 yards on the ground. I don't think we're going to see that again. LSU's been great against the run. In their last 4 games, they're allowing just 3 yards per carry as a team. So the run support probably not going to be there for Wegman, just like I don't think the run support's going to be there for Nussmeier, which puts us in a really tough spot in terms of placing a bet. If I'm being honest, I kind of think LSU's going to win, but I don't feel comfortable betting it. We've seen 3 straight overs in this matchup. I think both teams are going to have to resort to throwing the ball. I think they're going to struggle to run. So why not just say over? I'm leaning towards the over here. I haven't bet this one yet. 54.5. I think we're going to see a lot of throwing the ball. Give me the over. Next.
I'm actually out of time. I got to get this stuff posted. Damn, there's still some games I wanted to go through. I kind of like Duke plus the 11. I didn't bet that one. I think Kansas State will boat race Kansas. We'll talk about it on the live show. I'm going to go through all of them on the live show, 10 a.m. Eastern time. If you're able to make it, we'd love to see in the comments. If you want to just go see my bets and don't want to wait till the live show, just go on KyleKirms.com and click on the post. I'm going to post my favorite bets, parlays of the day. Same stuff I do every week. So if you're interested in that, just head over to the website and check it out. Yeah, see you all in the morning, bright and early, 10 a.m.